Thank you for joining. We're starting this webinar today on sustainability strategy. This webinar is held by Ksapa.org, Advise, Invest, Advocate. Before getting into the actual content, just a few online meeting instructions to ensure good and smooth participation of everyone. Your microphone is muted. That's a good way to ensure good quality with the communication and you have the best sound possible. We also encourage you to connect through the chat system if you want to ask a question or actively contribute. You just need to flag and raise your hand. This is something we are monitoring all along the webinar, so feel free to just use the virtual hand that is provided to your attention. We suggest that the people do not use videos. It's a way to ensure that there is maximum bandwidth, and it's actually also a good way to ensure the lowest carbon possible with this webinar, as the videos of people are not really necessary. If you want to meet with us and you want to make sure that we use the videos, no worries, we'll have other opportunities to meet up directly and chat one-on-one. Now we can move to the core of the discussions. Today, it's part of a series of webinars led by Ksapa.org on questions to define and activate a pertinent sustainability strategy. This webinar is based on decades actually of experience coming from the whole team and a good number of affiliates. We've developed this content in a very practical manner to make sure that for all of you as participants, you benefit from our experience. And 6 questions have been defined to ensure that we focus the content on our experience, engaging and leading, refreshing, implementing sustainability strategies for a good number of Fortune 500 companies around the world. The webinar today will be led by myself. My name is Farid Badash, and I'm basically the CEO of Ksapa.org. I will introduce you to our organization very shortly, but this is a good way for you to have a concise overview of our viewpoint on sustainability strategies. And the second part of the webinar, which is the reason why you're joining us, will focus on the context, why it is urgent to define a sustainability strategy that make the most and capitalize on experience to date, but most importantly, innovate, is creative, and is consistent with the big challenges ahead of all of that. And then we'll discuss 6 questions, 6 areas we believe are important for you to get it right, get it impactful, get it credible. So, introducing Ksapa.org, we are a mission-driven organization. That's actually why whenever you want to connect with us on the website, it's on the Ksapa.org, you can find us. Our content and team are all focused on 3 pillars of activities. We do lead consulting activities on sustainability, but Ksapa was created to ensure that we would address with the best impact possible capacity for investors and companies to accelerate transformation and contribute in the most effective manner to the global goals and the big social and environmental challenges ahead of all of us. Our team combined people were pretty experienced, generally more than 15 years of experience, and coming with a background from a good number of different activities. And we believe that it's the merging of all of these activities which make us particularly pertinent to drive sustainability strategies. Some of us have background in finance, some have background in sustainability, some have background in working for corporations, and so on. And our affiliates ensure beyond that, we are able to work with people who can contextualize operations and provide a local perspective or expand the expertise that is provided by our core team with complementary expertise on niche topics. We did a lot of consulting work that is pertinent to look at that from the sustainability strategy perspective. We lead materiality work, business strategy, we review risk and due diligence, and we implement and deploy and refresh programs that ensure that companies and investors can deploy pertinent strategies with good KPIs and good capacity to measure impact and report back on impact provided to an ecosystem of stakeholders, being investors, clients, and employees. We lead, and that's the innovative aspect also of Ksapa.org, investment programs. Our idea is basically to expand the capacity of companies to project transformation with access to additional funds from private investors through the model of impact investment funds. I'll make a very brief overview of what we do in that space, but long story short, the idea is basically that if companies are really willing to transform, they need to have access to resources, and with impact investment solutions, we believe that there are ways for companies working with their peers, with their suppliers, can have collaborative solutions to expand significantly the resources that they can activate to accelerate transformations. Last, we're a Ksapa.org organization, and as a mission-driven organization, we advocate. And we deliver a lot of our insights through blog articles, briefing papers, and reports. And across the presentation we shared with all of you today, we'll make sure to share some of those insights. And they are all accessible for free in an open source manner on our website, notably in our publication section at Ksapa.org. We work with a network of 150 plus partnering experts based across the world, as I mentioned, and our clients, those who are actively working with us as we speak, are global 500 and they're worldwide. Some are quoted in Europe and some are quoted in Northern America. This is a brief overview of our sustainability consulting services. And I need to flag that this presentation is recorded and will be uploaded on our website, meaning that I walk through those slides fairly quickly, but you can, of course, get back to those, download the presentation, share with colleagues and other people as you want, just after the presentation will be made in 53 minutes from now. This is a brief overview of our advocacy activities. The most recent briefing paper, which have been uploaded, are very aligned, for example, with the need for the big recession and crisis underway because of COVID-19 to revigorate the concept of inclusive growth. So recently we were asked by some of our clients what they could do in that space, and we said there is clearly 5 areas where business and companies can really focus programs and attention to deliver higher impact on inclusive growth. And you can download the paper to see whether these 5 areas and whether they can match with your own programs. We also are pretty active on human rights, and we deliver a lot of insights and briefing paper documents on that space, whether talking about investments or taking that from the perspective of supply chains, among other things. And so our intent is basically that building on the expertise provided by our team and affiliates, we share those insights in an open source manner. So feel free to use them and basically share them if that can be helpful for you, colleagues and programs and your ecosystem of stakeholders to not reinvent the wheel, learn from what we've been doing, what we know, to do better and with more impact. And we are, of course, always very happy to be in conversation with all of you and see how best we can learn and improve and accelerate. This is an example of impact investment program that we are designing and deploying. It's called Scale Up Technical Training Initiative. It is very connected with sustainability strategies in the sense that we are approaching sustainability strategies to really encourage investors and companies to see what they can do beyond what they've been doing to date, because we know that the environmental and social agenda for the decade to come is very, very, very challenging. We know that despite the fact that many companies have implemented sustainability strategies to date, it is just not enough. Transformation needs to happen at a larger scale and much faster than what's been the case to date. In a way to address that and provide a response, we've decided to develop and design impact investment funds. And in this case, let's take the example of a company in the food industry. This company knows that the company is sourcing some agricultural commodities, let's say fruits, and those fruits need to increase, at least the sourcing activity need to increase in decarbonation, one, and in mitigating social risks across the chain. When I look at the chain, most of the contributors are, let's say, smallholders and plantations. And if we really want to work on decarbonation of plantations and or improve the practices of smallholders, a solution here that we're designing at Ksapa is basically to put in place a fund which enable to invest in and provide the resources to transfer training, technical training to smallholders, and we use digital solutions also as much as face-to-face training sessions to disseminate the training, and transfer also resources at community level that people can use to acquire technologies and equipment needed to decarbonize faster their activities. So long story short, this is a kind of system which complements a sustainability strategy to say, well, to date, we've developed, for example, a program with targets and contractual clauses, and we're conducting audits and that kind of thing. And then we complement that with this kind of program that companies can support, working with peer companies or business partners to deploy more widely training solutions in a solution which, by the way, generate a return on investment. So we're moving from training programs which basically just cost money to programs which basically are a good way to make the most of the high level of liquidity currently available to generate return on investment and impact on the human rights agenda and on carbon. So what's at stake today when we are talking about how to refresh or design a new sustainability strategy? We want to talk about the context, then the strategies that can be deployed in response, and we want to look at that through concrete return on it coming from our experience through 6 questions. Ksapa.org released at the beginning of the year a report called Towards 2030. This report is the outcome of a detailed and extensive work, research, where we've engaged with a good number of companies and investors to understand what they had been doing to date and how they were looking at the new decade in terms of priorities, where to focus sustainability efforts. With this report, we've identified 6 sustainability priorities for the years to come. And these 6 priorities, of course, might depend on the industry or the geography we're talking about. But long story short, whether we're talking about some of your customers, your business partners, or some of the countries where you're headquartered and the regulations are trending, these 6 topics are really on top of the agenda of most, if not every, organization we had a chance to engage in this research program. Decarbonization, water, deforestation, risk mitigation, circularity, social inequalities, and the broader human rights agenda, which can include, for example, labor conditions, working conditions across supply chain. Most interestingly, we also discovered what could be new for companies to accelerate and exponentially expand the scope of the programs addressing sustainability issues at the scale needed given what's in front of us. Digital technologies is clearly one big promising area that we've explored through our report Towards 2030, which you can download on the Ksapa.org website on the publication section. And at the end of the day, we've identified multiple technologies, and most importantly, we've explored how these technologies could be particularly powerful to advance the sustainability agenda when they were combined together. For example, Internet of Things and blockchain together, or AI and 5G together. We're far from candid when it comes to a lot of the ethical and or climate or energy related challenges generated by the development and deployment of such digital technologies, and that's clearly part of what we've addressed with Towards 2030 Ksapa report. However, we just think that there is a lot of unknown in this space, and the more we know, the more we practice, the more we can better understand the ethical risks and identify solutions to mitigate some of those, and or quantum computing that is displayed on the screen is an illustrative technology that is developing and is actually a way to also reduce the energy intensity of some of the digital technologies at play. So we're in 2020. We know that digital solutions can be part of the solution. There are a lot of unknown, and we believe that the way these programs will be deployed between what we know today and what will be the case in 2025 will change dramatically. We believe also that to accelerate and expand programs on sustainability, to what there are innovative finance solutions available. We're in a world where the level of liquidity is pretty high, with a good number of investors exploring return on investment and impact, and where digital solutions provide new and innovative avenues to disseminate access to liquidities. When we put all of these trends together, we believe that innovative finance can enable companies and investors to expand significantly the reach of their sustainability programs and the speed of acceleration and transformation that is needed to adapt to a world which needs to become more resilient and more inclusive. You can download our 2030 report on our website, and there is actually also an executive summary. We also delivered a webinar to walk through the findings of that report earlier in the year. However, this page displays a good overview of some of the key findings that have been defined across the report. These business implications are a useful input to refresh or design a new sustainability strategy. And that's actually why we thought we would share those with you today as part of that webinar. Moving on, of course, we are having this webinar together today in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic crisis. It is clear that this COVID-19 crisis is a very difficult moment for many people, a lot of people in the world, and for a lot of companies, some being even in survival mode as we speak. It is clear that for the year to come, a recession and business is going to be in very difficult times. However, we want to look at that also from a more positive note. And COVID-19 is interesting on multiple fronts. It opens up a fundamental debate on sustainability because COVID-19 is we've worked ourselves a lot on pandemic programs as part of sustainability strategies across the past 20, 15-ish years. And COVID-19, like crises, have surfaced many times. And a lot of industries, for example, in the food industry or in the healthcare industries, have been perfectly aware that this kind of pandemic crisis could happen. However, despite the fact that it was pretty well documented, it's just that that was too big. And at the end of the day, people thought that that would just not happen. The truth is we're in the middle of something which has happened. It's very big, with huge impacts, with a lot of unknowns. And we think that this is an interesting learning to explore the future and understand that for the future that is coming for business between 2020 and let's say 2025 or 2030, COVID-19 shows that the unknown can become and the abnormal can become the normal, and that for a lot that we know, we can better. There is a lot to explore in terms of how to improve approaches to sustainability. Let's take that from a different perspective and explore climate. Climate, on a similar vein as COVID-19, is something which is pretty well documented, is pretty well known, but the level of preparation for it is just clearly way insufficient. So we believe that for the years to come, business has to adapt and understand that there will be a lot of turbulences that might come from other pandemic, from the aftermath of COVID-19, because this is clearly not, this is likely going to build a very difficult world for many people, not just for the months to come, but likely for the years to come. But beyond COVID-19, there will likely be other pandemic crises, there will be environmental crises, there will be social crises. So in that world, we need to learn with uncertainty. We need to learn to work and design sustainability strategies that can adapt to a world where abnormal can become the normal. That implies 5 principles, which are described in the article that you can read on our blog section on ksapa.org in our publications section, learning from COVID-19 to build more resilient societies. First is the concept of agility. At the end of the day, as we can see just through adaptation to crisis modes, agility can apply to the way companies need to get organized, companies need to source, companies need to predict and forecast. Agility. Collective is the second point, and that applies very well to sustainability strategies. You cannot address abnormal on your own. It's all about being able to develop collective approaches. This can be about working with communities. It can be about working with peer companies. It can be about working with business partners. It can be about anything that is relevant, but at the end of the day, it's all about sustainability, and it's all about addressing big issues together in a collective manner, and certainly not in an individualistic approach. The third aspect is the concept of transparency. When we have collectively to address unknown, and sustainability brings a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty, transparency is important to build trust and to explain how decisions are made based on what rational. With transparency, we have a very important concept that is to be kept top of mind in decisions, to ensure that whenever decisions are made, they can be explained to stakeholders, and they understand where the decisions are coming from, based on what context, what level of information. And the truth with humility is basically just that a couple of years or months later, even a sustainability strategy might need to be revisited based on how information and intelligence has evolved. Point number 4 is about public authority. There's been too much onto the sustainability front that has been all about the fact that private sector was able to address a lot of issues. The truth is it's just not the case. And if we talk about agility, collective approaches, and transparency, public authorities also have a role to play. We've explored a lot the human rights agenda, which has been pretty clarified in terms of the responsibilities that are expected from companies compared to what is expected from governments. We can look at it also from the climate angle and the biodiversity angles, where at the end of the day, state and governments and authorities have a role to play. In a broader sense, building good sustainability strategies and make sure that they are credible and impactful is also about clarifying roles of what should come and should be the contribution of private sectors, whether corporations or investors, and what must be the role of authorities and governments by the end of the day. Last and not least, principle that we encourage to use and apply to design sustainability strategies and approach all of these topics is this idea that it's important to navigate conflicting injunctions. That means being able to make long-term decisions factoring short-term imperatives. Let me take an example that is coming from COVID-19 management. Companies might be in a survival mode as we speak. That means that basically you don't have money to pay employees. Fair enough. How to prepare for the future, though? There is no better solution than encouraging companies to make sure that the matter they are treating employees, dismissing employees, to navigate short-term survival mode is made based and driven by principles, values that will build credible approach when times will be better and employees will come back. And that there is a certain level of trust that we maintain between the company and its ecosystems of stakeholders. So how the fifth point is about making sure that short-term imperatives are based and built with good consideration of longer-term needs. Sustainability strategies are based and driven by more than 4,000 regulations worldwide, asking for disclosure and extra financial performance, encouraging companies to invest in, let's say, carbon programs or the decarbonization programs, there are multiple injunctions pressing companies to accelerate. It is super complicated and super complex. We wanted here to flag a few initiatives being more or less relevant depending on the geographies. ISO 26000 is pretty important in continental Europe, much less so in North America, as an example. We provide here an overview of some global framework framing approaches of how companies are exploring environmental, social, and ethics. And at the end of the day, the idea with those aspects is to say that there are lots of injunctions coming to the shoulders of companies, and building sustainability strategies need to be made on those conflicting and complex injunctions. That's actually why, in response to that complexity, we suggest to work through 6 simple questions we believe are helpful for companies to design or refresh sustainability approaches. The point number 1 is to be very clear on priorities. And we say this because we know, and we worked on programs where companies had to face and address, they were coming with long lists of 50, 50, 100, 100, 200, 200 issues they thought they had to manage. A problem when you're a company and you want to develop a sustainability program addressing, let's say, 50 issues is basically you have a challenge of dilution of resources, dilution of impact, and at the end of the day, poor credibility in how you're addressing the issues. So the underpinning principle to start on the building of a good, pertinent sustainability strategy is really to be clear on why and how sustainability matters and how this can feed a vision and a mission for the company. Materiality has been a concept developed and that we have extensively implemented across good number of environments to clarify those selected priorities for companies. And a materiality matrix is a tool that is, we believe, a good entry point to build consensus and internal alignment within organizations as much as with ecosystems of stakeholders, customers, investors, civil society on some sensitive issues on what are the priorities of a company. In other words, what are the environmental and social issues which are specific for a company and on which the company has a very strong interest to work very, very seriously on those to mitigate risk or to accelerate transformation and remain competitive, build value on the long range. On our website, ksapa.org, you can find a good number of resources to go deeper on those issues of materiality. We produced last year a briefing paper that explored the concept through 6 questions to conduct a materiality assessment successfully. This graph shows a basic, very basic materiality matrix showing how a long list of topics, as you can see, that can be about energy efficiency or biodiversity, can have a relative priority for a given company. And the 2 axes show how they are important to the stakeholders, typically how they matter, and for customers, where customers are really expecting strong performance from a company, for example, and or how these issues are of relative importance to drive competitiveness of companies and mitigating risks, for example, in view of upcoming regulations and or opportunities in terms of how to make the most of, if you just take regulations, fiscal incentives. So the starting point that we believe is very important is this one. A good sustainability strategy starts with a good clarification on the priorities, the specific environmental and social and ethics priorities that can drive good business. Being specific means that we don't care about whether climate is important or not for your business. Of course, climate has implications for every kind of business. We care about the top 10 priorities, which might include climate, about what is specific to the business. Is it about specific methane, for example, which is HGG gas, that is very important in the industrial processes that need to be eliminated? Then we become specific. Is it about being about energy efficiency? Is it about the carbon that has a cost and that is included in strategic sourcing activities? There we translate the concept climate into very specific climate-related issues that can be of relative high importance for the business to be successful for the years to come. This is what we want to get out of a good materiality review. Then we move to point number 2, the baseline assessment, the starting point. We're in 2020. That means that for a lot of companies, and our clients are generally coming from the Fortune 500 companies, we're talking about companies which have a fairly long history in sustainability. They've been in that journey for 10, 20. For my own experience, I'm aware of first sustainability strategies that were developed in the early 90s. So you can see that we can be in 2020 revisiting sustainability strategies coming from 25 years of experience and programs, with 25 years of people scratching their head to define something interesting, something pertinent, something robust. At the end of the day, our point on the baseline assessment is not to be too critical about past activities today, but it's actually at least to be judgmental on one point. No matter what's been done to date, we know that this is just not enough to address the challenges that we have to face for the decade to come. So no matter the journey, no matter the level of energy and investment which have been put to develop sustainability programs across the past 10, 20, 30 years, it is good. We can capitalize on a lot of that, for example, in change management processes, and building internal alignment across people, in exploring the successes and failures that have been that have enabled the company to bring sustainability performance to wherever it might be today. And so we'd really find it important as part of that point number 2 to step back, take time to really assess those assets, meaning basically those successes today, because not just those liabilities, meaning basically what has failed today. Just take a very simple example. Many companies took some zero deforestation goals for 2020 in the early 2010, 2015. We are not aware of any company which has been able to meet that zero deforestation goal by 2020. This is a failure, a collective failure of companies, for example, in the food industry. What can we learn from that? What is the baseline assessment that we can build out of that to build something more credible, more pertinent? This is what we call baseline assessment. Good learning from the past to ensure that there is good understanding of the strengths and of the weaknesses that need to be weathered moving forward. Most importantly, what comes out of that is the following. Because we have a good materiality assessment and a good understanding of the environmental, social, and ethical priorities, because there is a good baseline assessment, we know the strengths, we've been successful to that. What has basically enabled the company to meet, to exceed performance in some sustainability areas to date, or to be a complete failure, is an excellent moment to explore resource allocation. Too many people working on sustainability, they could be attached to whatever department across large corporations, marketing, purchasing, sustainability, human resources, strategy, whatever. They complain to lack resources to address sustainability. Before exploring new and additional resources, we believe that a good baseline assessment combined with a good materiality review is an excellent way to explore whether current allocation of resources is pertinent. Sometimes we can discover that based on the resources spent to date, looking at the performance to date, we could spend less to basically get to similar level of achievement. That could be one solution. Out of the materiality review, we could consider that there are some issues of relative importance that are under-resourced compared to areas which basically sounds to be of lower relative importance that might be a bit too resourced. And then we can reallocate resource to support what is of most strategic importance. So there are multiple games that can be played in that space at that moment before complaining we don't have resources, to explore how best to be smart with the existing resources. That is really something we are happy to share because it's really based on our experience that moving step by step on the designing or the refreshing of a sustainability strategy in that specific area is very important, because later on in the process, we know what resources we can use to build good, solid, credible sustainability strategy. Point number 3 is related to what the companies in my industry are doing. What are the companies investing in the same portfolio as I do are doing, if I'm an investor, for example. Here we have a kind of, say, provocative approach to that. We believe that given what's been said up to now, and given the level of challenges and the turbulences that our businesses are going to face and are actually already facing as we speak for the months and the years to come, we wonder, we actually don't really believe that benchmarking and comparing performance with others is the right thing to do. It can be good as a starting point to know where the pack is starting from, but this is not what is going to drive innovation, and this is not what is going to provide the right level of inspiration to transform the companies and their strategies and their businesses and their practices and their products and services at the level that is needed. So our point number 3 might be to say, well, look at what others are doing, but don't spend too much on that. Define your own bold, radical target that can drive your own transformation. This is what matters. And of course, because this is need to be driven by rational, you can build scenarios and take a low profile scenario, which is all about staying in the pack of what peer companies are doing, and explore alternatives, more radical, transformative scenarios, which are all about exploring what you can do that is really different and transformative, and at what cost, what risk, and with what benefit. This point is important also as point number 3 of our approach, because with clarity on the priorities, if priorities coming from the materiality assessment, and with a better understanding of the resources that could be available without exploring new resources, then we can start to fly. We can start to be creative and really explore what is really going to be a game changer in the way we are operating to face big transformations that are needed. Let me take another example. Paris Agreement on Climate is asking companies or investors exploring their portfolios of activities to be low carbon and define an approach that is aligned and consistent with a 1.5 degree approach. That is pretty radical, and that is calling for a very, very, very aggressive reduction of carbon exposure, whether we're talking about the portfolio of assets, whether we're talking about factories processing products, whether we're talking about sourcing activities, it's very aggressive. Here we say, if we benchmark with companies and peer companies, you don't get the inspiration you need. This is not because you are going to benchmark with companies that you're going to find the solutions needed to be as aggressive as what's needed to adapt in your business to a climate constraint world. And building on this example, we have the experience to have worked and designed, for example, climate strategies for companies back in 2000, 2010, 2015. And so we remember the time when, for example, a decade ago, the development of climate strategies It was driven by what we knew at that time, and building internal consensus across multiple functions within corporations was a process where we had to go through a lot of questions, whether what we were trying to do was too ambitious, too bold, whether companies were able to transform. And the truth, and we've engaged with a good number of those programs very recently to revisit those past activities. It concluded that, and a lot is actually available as public information because it's disclosed across, for example, sustainability reports. We've concluded that on many fronts, back in 2010, many companies thought that they were ambitious in the way they were approaching climate. For example, some taking the pathway to reduce using a factor 4 their carbon emissions. And when we look at that in 2020, we can see that many have exceeded significantly the goals they defined for themselves for 2015 or 2020. That meant that they thought that there was the internal consensus that they were pretty bold and pretty aggressive, but the truth is they've exceeded their goals. And we can look at that from the 2020 perspective and conclude also that they were not that bold at the end of the day because much more is needed. So we are sharing this experience right now because we think that this is an interesting learning to explore how to define bold and radical targets in 2020, exploring 2025 or 2030. We could be in very similar situations with colleagues or departments within large corporations saying, hey, what you want to do is too aggressive. But learning from climate strategies back 10 years ago, no, it's actually wrong. It's actually a duty, a responsibility to be even more bold and radical, building new sustainability strategies, because past experience has proven that more was needed. Moving to point number 4, governance. This point is about the process of exploring priority topics, 1, and 2, it's about being able to also implement on the priority topics. And whether we're talking about what needs to be explored or what needs to be implemented, we are facing complexity. And this complexity can be assessed, explored exclusively if and only if it is driven by diversity, multi-viewpoints. What I mean by that, what we mean by that is basically that if people defining a sustainability strategy, one way or another, look the same, they have the same, let's say, corporate background or professional background, coming from the same geographies or whatever, it is way too limited to understand and decrypt the complexity that is at stake. So we strongly encourage to design sustainability strategies, first and foremostly, if we're talking about people from within a company, expanding as much as possible the perspectives across functions from the company, as much as across layers of responsibility. Employees have a lot to say about sustainability. It's not exclusively something that should come from top management. And externally, companies also have to explore the concepts from the environmental, social, and ethical concepts, which are of primary importance, with a large diversity of perspectives. Let's take, for example, a human rights agenda, and more precisely, topics like improving labor conditions of workers. The external perspective and expertise that might be interesting to bring to the table might be people coming with a development expertise, people who are very strong exploring the roots of poverty, for example, people coming with very strong expertise on gender. There are multiple perspectives that can enrich significantly the understanding of the complexity of some environmental, social, and ethical topics which are at stake. And then again, this point number 4 comes building on the 3 points made up to now. You cannot develop a strong and detailed build diversity if you are focusing on too many topics, hence the importance of materiality. This needs to be resourced, hence the importance on resource allocation. And this needs to be activated with bold objectives in terms of transformation. What's the point of a large diversity if it's all about just poor, limited, continuous improvement of what's been implemented up to now? So the whole value of diversity in the way we're using this term as we speak is all about being focused on the most strategic sustainability topics, and which need to be fed by a good, broad perspective to understand the multifaceted complexity of sustainability. The point that we want to explore to design good sustainability strategies here is to revisit again, then later on, the concept of resources. Earlier, as point number 3, we mentioned point number 2, sorry, we mentioned the importance of resource allocation, better reflecting priorities. That's a first step to explore how best to use and how smarter to be using resources available. And on this point number 5, where we want to explore ways to expand access to resources and be creative. One point, which I find particularly interesting as we speak right now, because this is something that we've explored significantly across recent programs, is the collaboration between sustainability teams, for example, and financial teams. The CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, and the CFO, Chief Finance Officer, can become really best friends exploring sustainability agenda, because sustainability can be a way for CFO to really save money, but also for the sustainability team to explore access to funds they didn't even think of. For example, when it comes to exploring climate impact and revisit decisions made in terms of industrial investments that can be made across corporations. Here we're talking about millions that can be relocated. So a tip, I would say here, engage in onboard CFO people across sustainability program discussions, and or explore CFO programs and try to bring an environmental, social, and ESG lens to help a CFO understand the extra financial perspective supporting her decisions. But beyond the relationship with CFOs, it's important to think out of the box. And back to the Towards 2030 report released by Ksapa.org in January this year, where we are exploring 13 innovative finance solutions, we think that companies can think in creative manners to explore ways to expand resources available to fund sustainability programs. I would just take 2 examples out of this graph that is displayed as we speak. One, impact investing. If you're a food company sourcing fruits from a given country, you can explore ways to include impact investors in a program that explore gender issues and access to better education, access to gender-biased, non-biased products, for example. Some impact investment funds are interested in those solutions. So it can be a food company team up with impact funds and with people or organizations deploying solutions on the ground to expand basically the reach of your sustainability program and access to different resources. It takes time, but the scale and disruptive solutions can be of very, very interesting, with very, very interesting outcomes. Another example that we can see here is through digital vehicles. But for example, one thing is to think in terms of cash, and the other thing is to explore tokenization of currency. I've been working on a program where we explore how to give carbon compensation value to communities, but they don't really have access to the cash, but they can use those credits that are tokenized to acquire insurance solutions or equipment solutions. So in that sense, we use or we explore solutions to use virtual money, I would say, to expand purchasing power and solutions provided to communities without necessarily using, let's say, real-world cash-based money. And with some communities building trust and, of course, exploring that through pilots, that can be powerful solutions to expand again the sustainability reach and impact of multiple programs. These examples that I'm sharing require much longer and detailed discussion because it can have risks, ethical risks, compliance risks, the multiple aspects that need to be explored. But we're just sharing those examples to show that there are many ways to be creative to approach sustainability and access to resources at the level that is needed, again, to address 20 and project or forecast activities as they should look like in 2025 in terms of impact on the sustainability agenda. Last aspect for discussion today, we're in a world where I would pause here and say, let's say that you've defined a sustainability strategy with good understanding of your priorities, bold, radical targets, embarking or onboarding the whole organization to transformation by 2025, 2030, driven by good creative approaches to access the resources needed. This is all great, but is this going to build trust and ensure that this is credible for investors, customers, employees? Not so sure. Amidst COVID-19, we're in a moment when the trust in government, businesses, and investors has been very low. So sustainability strategies can only be credible and trusted if able to rebuild also trust with all those stakeholders. And a good strategy is something we believe, and that's the sixth point, that is not any longer exclusively based on reporting back on performance to date, but most importantly, able to demonstrate how the company can deliver positive impact for the years to come and for the contribution to the global goals that can be defined, let's say, by 2030. This implies, and I want you to look particularly at the graph of the display on the screen here, that instead of looking at historical data, you are able to define a sustainability strategy and develop solutions to forecast and explore how you envision to have impacts on priority goals for the years to come. One thing is to say, I want to be climate friendly. The other thing is to say, look, we are aligned and consistent with Paris Agreement and a 1.5 degree trajectory. This is where we will be in 2025, and this is what we are going to do to deliver on that commitment. Instead of being backward looking, this is a way to be forward looking. This is a completely new approach that is pretty disruptive in the way ESG reporting has worked up to now, but we believe that this is something that increasingly can be built using big data, for example, that can provide some predictive information. And we have strategic partners we work with in data science to help design such programs at Ksapa.org. And we've shared a lot of insights on those areas, enabling companies and investors to report on sustainability strategy and performance in a way that can be trusted and credible, driven by impact. This is, so if you are interested in these innovative approaches, to build trust and credible engagement with stakeholders, such as investors, customers, employees, and others. You can, of course, walk through our website on our publication section, where we've outlined here just a few briefing papers, which we believe can be helpful to be downloaded. And our blog article section provides also a couple of articles, we believe, and insight coming from our team, which we believe can be interesting to share. We're getting to the end of our webinar for today. We are very delighted to have had you with us. This webinar is recorded and uploaded on our website, so you can have access to it, share this webinar with colleagues, other experts, and peer people you think can find it inspiring and good source to explore those complex topics of sustainability. And we are very happy to make sure that you are going to build out of those resources. There are a few things you can do as well. One is to register to our monthly newsletter. On our website, there is a newsletter section accessible through the publication part of the website. You just need to register your email, and on a monthly basis, you'll get an update from us about our latest insights and publications. You can browse on a regular basis on our website, of course, where content is uploaded in an open source manner. Feel free, as these are open source resources, to use them and share them. They're developed for that purpose. And you can also connect with us across our social media channels, LinkedIn, Ksapa.org, Twitter, Ksapa.org, and Medium, Ksapa.org, where you can keep an eye on our developments that are coming. Thank you so much. The setting of this webinar did not enable you to interact actively, but not even to see actually the other people who were able to take part in the participation. But I can see that the comments show, and I've tried to address many, if not all of them, as I was sharing and leading that presentation. Thanks so much for the feedback that is very positive about this webinar, which seems to have been very helpful. These are our contact details that have been displayed on that screen. We wish you an excellent day that is starting from some of you, closing for some others, and we'll be happy to remain in touch in the weeks to come.